I don't know what you want from me. Upstairs at Froelich, show 420, reel 1.
Nightmare 2, while it performed well, made a little over half of what the first movie made.
Yeah.
So this is where New Line is in damage control. They're like, okay, we fucked up. We rushed it out to capitalize. Even though we made money, we didn't make as much as we thought we were going to make. Now, luckily, they had, the very next year, they had Critters, and Critters did very well for them. So then now we're in damage control mode. We're like, okay, if we're going to keep Freddy going, we need to make a good product. We need to make something good. Now, what's funny is the guy they hired, they wanted, it's just this whole wraparound thing, what I love. So I know you've seen the movie Dreamscape, of course.
Yeah. That was, we talked about that.
Okay.
Dennis Quaid, Kate Capshaw. Yep. Yeah, and have a heart, Alex.
Okay. And written by?
What was that? Frank Darabont? No, Chuck Russell. Sorry.
Chuck Russell wrote that. Now, I guess here's the ironic thing. I was watching a special about how Nightmare on Elm Street, before it was self-distributed by New Line Cinema, it was actually going to be, it was shopped around to studios. 20th Century Fox passed on it because they were distributing Dreamscape and they felt it was too similar to a Nightmare on Elm Street.
It's Dreamscape is more, I guess, science fiction than horror, though, right?
Right. It is more of a science fiction movie. But then it's just ironic about how the studio, it's like how Chuck Russell comes around back into all this. It's like, Fox, you passed on a big property that would have made you a lot of money, but yet New Line was able to get the guy that fucking wrote the movie. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was just awesome that happened, and it showed that they thought Chuck Russell had talent. But then again, that wasn't even the beginning of it. The beginning of it was they tried to repair the relationship with Wes Craven.
Right.
And they said, look, we want you back. We're going to do a third one. We want you back. And the third one was supposed to end it. They were supposed to end the whole movie series with the third one.
With the death of Nancy, right?
With the death of Nancy. And they figured they gave Freddy a definitive end to how
That's
he
sort
was.
of that was what I was referring to in the previous episode. We talked about Wes Craven saw Nightmare on Elm Street as the story for Nancy, his character. It's a character he creates and his kind of, I don't know, his version of himself, but as, I guess, a girl, the final girl. She has to be the final girl because that's just sort of a standard in horror movies. So he creates the whole nightmare thing, and it's supposed to be about her. And the way I was thinking about it was Ripley and Alien. Ripley exists in this alien universe as their main antagonist, and they are her antagonist, and no matter where she goes, there they are. And there's even a line of dialogue in Alien 3 where she says, "You've been in my life so long, I don't remember anything else." And I think that Freddy exists as the personal antagonist of Nancy, and that's how I was thinking of that. So that's where we start with the trilogy, right? But it doesn't. It's interesting because it transfers its heroines. We follow the Dream Warrior is basically the story of Kristen Parker at the beginning, right? Played by Patricia Arquette. We follow her throughout the whole thing, and then we move on, and she winds up getting killed off in the second movie, and Alice takes over, played by Lisa Wilcox, and she continues on until the end of the third movie. So, but it is all connected.
And she doesn't die or anything.
She doesn't. No, she kind of gets a happy ending,
Kind of, sort of, in her own. Well, she. In her own way, gets a happy ending. But the third one was just like, the third one was the start of everything. It was like literally, the third movie was the start of Freddy Mania.
What do you know about the original story as written by Wes Craven, Bruce Wagner, and how it translated?
You see, that's the thing.
And how it translated into how they got Darabont and Russell, I guess.
Wes Craven and Bruce Wagner wrote the original screenplay. It was so outlandish, and New Line basically said, "Thank you for your service. We'll take it from here." Yeah, there's the door. And then they said, "Okay, we got to bring this thing in for under $5 million." Wes Craven wrote like a $15 million movie. We got to bring this motherfucker in for under $5 million.
Man, I would love to see a script. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I would love.
Actually, I mean, when you look at Dream Warriors, it's fucking insane anyway on its own. It does a pretty good job of being crazy.
Boy, I mean, the movie's creative, dude. That movie was just because of the special effects technicians. They had some of the best at the time. You had Dream Quest Images, which were still big around that time. Steve Johnson, Kevin Yeager, all those guys, they were still up and coming. Kevin Yeager was still doing Freddy makeup. He hadn't done the Crypt Keeper yet. Hell, he was a year He was like a year or two removed from doing Chucky at this point. So Kevin Yeager was still an up-and-comer around this point. The only thing that kind of sucks about it was the stop-motion animation they do at the very end there. You know, when dude's fighting Freddy's bones.
Right.
The stop-motion animation's a little...
No, I mean, it's got this level of quality to it. I mean, it's not anything you expect. When I saw the movie, and it wasn't just your standard walking around slow, being chased, and then being chased by a guy with claw hands or whatever it might be, like the least amount of effort to make a horror film or a slasher film. There's a lot of thought put into this, and its characters are so...
There was a lot of thought put into it, yeah. Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont, two brilliant writers, man. They went on and collaborated.
They did The Blob. They did The Blob together.
They did The Blob, for God's sake. Yeah, if not for Chuck Russell doing Nightmare 3, he wouldn't have been able to do it. He wanted to do The Blob years ago. He wanted to do it years ago, but they couldn't do it because he didn't have the financing. Once Part 3 hit, he was able to do The Blob.
Was that New Line?
I think it was independently financed, but TriStar picked it up. I think. I'm not 100%.
Right. And then also Darabont wrote The Fly, too, around this time, too. He co-wrote it.
Yeah, so everybody came out.
These are actual writers. Again, I have to point this out. These are writers, not producers. They write, meaning... everything in their head just winds up on the screen, and they tell a story that way rather than thinking about a producer. And that I think is what stems from New Line's reaction to their first draft, because this is a first draft script. It's written by writers, and they're like, "This is too expensive. We don't have this kind of money." But a writer's job is to imagine the impossible. I know it sounds pretentious, but it's true.
Well, yeah, it is true. And
Wes Craven's a writer.
What this movie...
And so are Frank Darabont and Chuck Russell. Chuck Russell started out as a producer, though, right?
Yes, because he worked on Hell Night.
The movie we talked about, Back to School.
Yeah, Girls Just Want to Have Fun. He worked on that. Like, he worked on a couple of New World productions. Mm-hmm. Like, he was working for New World for a little while. Not the Corman New World, the new regime New World. He was working for them for a little bit. Still
cheaper than hell kind of production company there. Even after it was purchased. I mean, the purchase price wasn't even that high. Frankly, I think Corman... I don't know why Corman sold it, because he would go and he would start anher company. New Concord. Right?
Yeah, he started Concord.
Well, Concord, New Horizons, then New Concord.
Yeah, I don't even know why he sold, but
maybe it was a tax thing or something. I don't know. Oh, by the way, Corman just turned like 97 a couple of weeks ago. Happy birthday!
Still fucking kicking, dude. He's still fucking kicking. I don't believe it.
Yep.
Well, good for him. I'm glad he's still around. I'm glad he's
still around.
The guy
Corman is the reason why we have all these filmmakers. You know, he's the reason.
And all the greats worked under him. You know, Joe Dante, freaking Jim Cameron, Francis Ford Coppola.
Scorsese. Gave him his first job, his first official job as editor on a movie called Holy Rollers that a friend of mine was watching the other day. My friend Ken was watching this movie. It's a movie about roller skating babes, and Scorsese is like the editor on it. You can see his name in the title.
Fucking Ronnie Howard.
Little Ronnie, Opie Cunningham.
Little Ronnie Howard.
So basically, you're saying that they brought in Darabont and Russell to kind of cut the budget on the screenplay.
Pretty much, they cut the butt.
But this is still the general idea, right? This is the general idea of what they wanted.
And the general idea is there. They just had to pare it down a little bit.
The brilliant idea, this is the $1 million idea right here, is that you get a bunch of mental patients to become heroes. And that is something I thought was so amazing about this.
But then you find out that they're all mental because they all suffer the same problem. It's not the fact that they're mental patients. It's the fact is they are in the insane asylum because they all suffer the same problem, just like the characters from the first movie. They all share the dream of the same guy, and but it turns out with a twist, they are the last of the Elm Street children. They are the last children of the families that burned Freddy Krueger alive X amount of years
ago. This is some kind of a mission for Freddy, just to kill these kids.
And what's funny is, the movie is called Freddy. The second one's called Freddy's Revenge. This more or less is Freddy's Revenge.
Yeah, it is. The Freddy's Revenge part of that with Mark Patton in the second movie. I don't know. Is Mark Patton? Is Jesse an Elm Street kid? He's not even related to this, right? Clu Gallagher.
No,
Clu Gallagher and Hope Lang.
He just lived in Nancy's fucking
That's all.
house.
So it is. That's your Amityville Horror part of that thing. Is I guess Freddy still.
It's like literally you can take part 2 and put it to the fucking wayside.
That's why it doesn't really make sense, because they either go back to the house where Freddy is, or they go back to a boiler room where Freddy is. But Freddy inhabits these places apparently.
Well, again, part 2 was just thrown together. It was just a thrown together fucking movie. Hey, let's throw whatever we can at the fucking wall and see.
Still a lot of screams in the audience. The audience loved the movie. They ate it up like crazy. You should have heard the
yeah, but
high-pitched
now
screaming, especially at the beginning with the bus driver turning into Freddy, and you see his claws operating the stick shift on the school bus. All of a sudden, there was this high-pitched squealing in the back of the theater.
A different time, a different
guess,
place. Yeah. I wish I would have grew up in that part of the '80s, and saw all those movies. But I was the VHS kid. God damn it.
So, Kristen Parker, as played by Patricia Arquette in this movie, one of her first roles. Her mother, played by Brooke Bundy, takes her to a psychiatric hospital. Who is the head doctor there? But Craig Wasson from Body Double, and we were like watching this, going, "Oh my God, that's the guy from Body Double," and he's in it. But of course, nowadays he's known as Bill Maher because everybody thinks he looks like Bill Maher.
Everyone thinks he looks like.
And in
Bill
fact,
Maher,
people fuck with Bill Maher. They constantly, whenever they like send in questions on his show, sometime it's like, "I loved you in Body Double," and he's like, "That wasn't me. That was Craig Wasson. I was Pizza Man." Okay, I was in Cannibal Girls in the Avocado Jungle of Death. And it's like, okay, all right. He doesn't like being compared to Craig Wasson. Craig Wasson, first I want to talk about Brooke Bundy for a second. Brooke Bundy has the distinction, because she was in this movie and she was in the next movie, and even though it seemed like she was killed in this movie, but they brought her back.
Well, she was only killed in a nightmare.
But the thing is, people get killed in nightmares and die in these movies, okay?
But Freddy manipulates. Like, it wasn't her dream. It's like, it was Kristen's dream, and Freddy was manipulating the.
And from what I read, I mean, like Brooke Bundy, when they called her for Dream Master, she was like, "You killed me in the last movie." It's like, no. But I want to point out, she is the very first chief engineer of Star Trek: The Next Generation. She showed up in one episode only. I don't know why, but they didn't bring her back. But in the second episode of the show and the first one in regular production after the pilot, she's the chief engineer of the Enterprise, of Enterprise D. And from that moment on, they go through a string of engineers until the second season when they finally make Geordi the engineer. But she pops up in that episode, and she pops up here. And here she's Patricia Arquette's mom. And she's the chick who replaced her later on, and her mom. And I don't know.
Tuesday
night. And I don't know why Brooke isn't like, you look a lot different from my daughter. So they put her there, and then she starts talking about these nightmares, and it turns out these kids kind of share this, and she kind of goes crazy and tries to kill her. And Lawrence Fishburne, who's in this movie too, playing an orderly, which is awesome. We were watching it.
I love it, and he's credited under
Larry Fishburne.
Larry
This,
Fishburne.
I don't know how, because I know Lawrence Fishburne was in a bunch of movies. He was in Apocalypse Now. He's underage, I remember.
Right, but then he did a couple of blaxploitation flicks, in the early days when he was a kid.
All I know is Apocalypse Now and Rumblefish. He was in that too.
Cornbread Earl and Me, he was in that.
I guess maybe as he got Shakespearean later on, he was like, to be or not to be. Alas, poor York, he became Lawrence Fishburne. My wife has such a huge crush on him. She's loved him ever since. I mean, like, he was in Othello with Kenneth Branagh, and then of course The Matrix. I mean, the guy's he's an icon. Frankly, he's an icon.
And then but then it was like this one little bit part in this movie.
So strange that he pops up here.
That's why this is a good movie, because it has like two big fucking actors in it now. Like one of them an Academy Award winner, and then you have Lawrence Fishburne.
I think it was School Days. School Days is the movie that made him a big star.
Days, okay.
Him and Giancarlo Esposito are rivals in this black university.
But this movie just has it has a lot of good actors. It just sucks. Like I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Anybody and everybody will come back and talk about their experiences on Freddy movies, except for Johnny Depp and Patricia Arquette. And it's like, why?
Well, also Breckin Meyer too, right? Mr. Breckin Meyer didn't show up on the thing because he's such a huge fucking star. By the way.
Oh yeah, he's this gigantic.
He's a gigantic. Oh my God,
right
he's even bigger. I think Amber Heard took 2 dumps in his bed. No, he's a co-creator of Robot Chicken, and get a sense of perspective, Breckin.
You're not good enough to fucking not talk about this thing. You're not God, okay? Like Johnny Depp, okay, fine.
Mr. Depp was busy. Miss Arquette was busy. Miss Arquette was busy. All of them are a lot busy. I don't know what Breckin Meyer's doing. Breckin Meyer was in. What was he in? He was in
Road Trip.
Well, no, something decent. Oh, Josie and the Pussycats. He was in that, right?
He
was in the boy band with Seth Green that gets killed at the beginning of.
Yes.
Wasn't he also
in?
Wasn't he also in Can't Hardly Wait? Is he just one of Seth Green's hangers-on, basically?
I think so. He was also in Go.
Right. Okay.
Everyone forgets about Go. He did some good, dude. He did some solid movies, but he's not like He's not like this Oscar-winning actor. It's like, dude, he doesn't pop up in anything
Yeah,
anymore.
and like you were telling me, Bryan Cranston showed up in a documentary for Alligator.
Yeah. It's like, dude, if Bryan Cranston, Walter fucking White can go back and talk about his
Oh, and
experiences
Liam Neeson talks about Darkman.
Yeah,
Liam
talks about
fucking
Darkman.
Neeson. Okay, Brecken fucking Meyer isn't anybody. Did Jennifer Rubin at least show up for the documentary?
Oh yeah, Jennifer Rubin.
That's good.
showed up.
I like Jennifer Rubin a lot. She popped up in a lot of stuff after this movie, mostly in a lot of like cable movies that were in the middle of the night. But I've always enjoyed her.
Bad Dreams, of course, was the other movie that she did. A lot of people compared that to A Nightmare
She
on Elm
is
Street.
the one who is in this movie. She is like every patient, basically, all these kids has their own basic hang up, but she's like a drug addict or something.
Yeah,
She's a recovering heroin addict. I mean, she happens to be one of the Nightmare on Elm Street kids, the Elm Street kids, but she's fucked up. I don't know. It remains to be seen whether or not, because there's a lot of, it's a little bit like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. There are some that are gregarious, and there are some that are horny, there are nymphs, and then there are some that are withdrawn and kind of on a spectrum, but we didn't talk about autism back then,
No.
Right, so Nancy shows up, and this is something that confused me, because, right, we talked about how Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 takes place 5 years after this takes place 2 years after that, so this adds 7 years to, and the thing about it is that Heather Langenkamp was 20 years old when Elm Street came out, and she was 23 when this movie came out, but she's supposed to be actually
27.
Well, maybe, not quite, because she's
25,
still in high school.
25,
She's still in
25.
high school in the first movie.
So let's say, for sake of argument, she's supposed to be 25.
How the hell did she already become like a doctor? And that requires 8 years on top of the 4 years of high school. It should have been 12 years rather than 7, right?
Richard, a lot of people go to college for 7 years. Yeah, they do. They're called doctors.
But this is like, and they try. Okay, at some point, one of your daughter, how old is your youngest daughter there?
My youngest is 5 years old.
At some point, she's going to go into your bedroom and find your wife's official business clothes or something like that, and she's going to put them on, and she's going to put makeup on her face, and she's going to look at herself in the mirror. That's what girls do. That's what Heather looks like in this movie. She looks like a little girl wearing big girl clothes. She still looks really young, even though they try to make her look older, but it just doesn't work out. She looks really young.
Yeah, she's way too young to pull it off.
And she's wearing business suits with padded sleeves. It's cute. She looks adorable. She looks like she's playing dress up, though. And Craig Wasson looks way too old for her, and they're supposed to be romantic leads in this movie.
You want to talk? Okay, I want to break away just for a quick second. You want to talk about way too old for somebody? You're going to laugh at the movie I just watched for the very first time last week. Dead Calm.
Wow, yeah, that is a great movie. Ooh, I can't believe you never saw that, dude. Philip Noyce.
Well, because here's the thing. I knew all about the movie. But then when I'm watching, I'm just like,
It's Sam Neill.
Nicole Kidman is way too young.
Yeah, Billy Zane's more her speed.
Yeah.
They should have been a couple. Sam Neill should have been. But the thing about it is Sam Neill specializes in playing parts where his wife or girlfriend gets screwed by another guy. Every movie he ever does, like Possession, we talked about that. Instead, it was an octopus monster, though, that time. But then there was also the piano, he chopped off Holly Hunter's fingers, and she winds up screwing Harvey Keitel, What kind of a world do we live in where Holly Hunter dumps Sam Neill for Harvey Keitel?
That movie was, Dead Calm was good, but I'm just making...
It's a great movie with a great death scene when they fire the fucking flare gun in his head and it explodes. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that was shot in post. That was done in post, right?
No, well, of course. They didn't kill Billy Zane for the movie, really.
No. That was not the original ending. The original ending...
He was supposed to get harpooned or something?
No. The whole ending where you saw Billy Zane get the fucking thing there, that was it. The ending was she pushes him on that fucking lifeboat, and then when Sam Neill gets back to the boat, the movie ends. Like, that was the ending.
So they kind of...
And the studio called reshoots so they could put in a stinger.
That is the commercially correct decision, and it was a great ending.
I guess. I did like that flare scene. I knew he was going to come back. The killer was going to come back for one final scare.
Of course, yeah. It is a horror movie.
But I did not. But then that whole flare in the mouth thing, I was just like, holy fuck, what a way to go.
Awesome. It's like a home invasion thing, but it's more like a boat invasion thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, they made... Okay, the thing about it is... That's an art film, but then I think that Philip Noyce wanted to make an art film, and I think the studio was like, no, we can't have this ending. It's kind of anticlimactic, right? So you got to have an explosion. It's kind of like Jaws. Jaws in the book, The shark just succumbs to being weighted down by all the barrels and just
All the
drowns,
barrels.
basically dies. But at the ending of the movie, they blow him up, and that's the commercially correct decision to make, because that's, it may not be that accurate, because they did test it on MythBusters. If you shoot an oxygen tank, it doesn't exactly explode like that. It just sort of, just fizzles out. It goes. Just farts off, and the shark has got it in his mouth. So it's not going to be a big deal. A lot of filmmakers want to make art films, but then understand that people are going to be upset if they don't get the appropriately cathartic, visceral ending, and that involved Billy Zane's head exploding.
Yes.
It was a great effect too. I mean, they did a fine job.
But in this case, now in the case of Freddy,
This is not a commercial ending. My God, we killed our heroine. I mean, that was the one thing that really disappointed me too. I mean, I understand that maybe Wes Craven did not want this to be a franchise, because maybe he was a filmmaker like that back then. That was the kind of guy he was.
Well, because you got to think about it, he only ever directed one sequel.
You told me that he didn't even. That was contractually obligated to do that.
And it was contractually obligated thing that he had to do. Like, I think the first real sequel that he made was New Nightmare, but even then, that wasn't even a sequel.
New Nightmare
is more.
Well, when we get to, we'll talk about that when we get to it. It is such an interesting thing, because it's the beginning of his meta career. But he did do sequels later on for Scream. He did all of the sequels.
Yeah, I was going to say Scream 2, 3, and 4. He did all those sequels, So, I mean, Wes wasn't against the idea of doing sequels. It was just like, hey, if you're going to do a sequel, it might as well be worth doing.
Scream is different, because Scream is self-referential horror. It's a horror movie that exists in the world of horror movies. Most movies do not, I would say 99.9% of movies do not exist in the world of movies. It's very interesting. We were watching Open Water the other day, and Open Water is a favorite of mine. It's probably the second greatest movie about a shark ever, or sharks. And they make mention of movies in the movie, but they're playing when they're bobbing up and down in the ocean. They play 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon or whatever, but not one of them, not either of them, mentions Jaws. So it's a movie that doesn't exist. Jaws doesn't exist in that world. And if it did, I mean, if it were me and my wife stuck out there in the ocean, we'd be like, uh-oh, fucking great white sharks, Jaws. Spielberg kind of ruined the reputation of great white sharks with that movie, but it's a horror movie. What are you going to do?
Now, on this one, I mean, it doesn't have a stinger ending. It has the door. Kevin Smith always had an expression I've always liked, and I continue to use it to this day. When he made Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, that was meant to end his View Askew universe. Now, of course, we know it hasn't ended. He's continued on.
Right.
But he always said, my door is not shut. I'm just going to, it's like, notice when the book at the end of the movie shuts, there's a bookmark there. It's like the door's never completely shut. It's just open a little ajar.
Right.
Doors open a crack. And that was the whole purpose of the stinger ending on Dream Warriors was, yes, it was meant to end the whole thing. But then when you see Craig Wasson sleeping in the bed, and he's got Kristen's little, paper mache thing of the house, the light turns on. That was the little, hey, the movie's over, but we got the door open just a little bit if this movie does well, and we can make a sequel.
Yeah.
I like that. I mean, I like how it gives a definitive ending at the time, but the door is open just a crack, so Freddy can come.
It's sort of like a
again.
strange, subtle, coda to the death of Nancy, which is just well. First, we have to get into the Warriors aspect of it. Now, Nancy shows up at this hospital and starts telling the stories of Freddy and all that stuff, and then she identifies that they're all Elm Street children. They all have to. We get into this strange telepathy thing that's going on, and first there's telepathy, then there's telekinesis. They're making objects fly around because when they're in their dream and they know
in their dreams. Yeah, and that was the one thing.
So
you see, I wish they would have explained that a little more.
It's still fascinating, though, even then. Little bits of things.
Enough,
like if you know that you're in a dream, then you can do anything. That's lucid dreaming.
That is one way to put it. It's like the kid gets up, in my dreams, I can walk. In my dreams, I am the wizard.
It's funny, too, because none of them work. That Freddy just sort of kills them all. Yeah, they have powers, but it doesn't really do any good.
It doesn't. And then what's funny is you think about it, the one character whose power translated to the real world was Joey. What was Joey's power in the dreams? He could talk.
Is he
And then what happens in part 4? He can talk.
That's he's the only other character that appears, right? He's the only other actor that comes back.
Joey and Kincaid are the only two from part 3 that bring their way back into them. Well, they couldn't afford Patricia Arquette on the fourth one.
I don't know, but she already
she didn't even want to come back. She didn't even want to come back.
I don't understand. Why didn't Patricia Arquette come back? She wasn't quite a big star yet. She didn't become a big star until the 90s. I mean, she was in the first big thing I remember seeing her in was probably a Tales from the Crypt episode that she was in, but that was like 2 or 3 years later.
Yeah, that whole where she played the horny farmer's daughter trying to fuck the scarecrow.
Oh yeah, and then she gets killed, and it's a really great episode actually, but.
Yeah, it's a good episode.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't really do anything. Uncle Buck, no, not really.
Not Uncle.
She was in. Well, she was in the cartoon. I think there was. No, she did some voices. It says additional voices here for some reason.
I don't know how much shit she did. Maybe she just didn't want to do it. Maybe she just didn't want to be relegated to the world of horror films. Who the fuck knows?
Okay. Okay. I remember that she was in the Indian Runner, which was Sean Penn's movie, and she was Viggo Mortensen's girlfriend or wife or something in that movie.
Okay, I actually own that movie.
And but. Ethan Frome, no, True Romance, maybe Ed Wood. She started, she did this movie that Leonard Nimoy directed called Holy Matrimony. She was a star of that one with, I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt was in that too, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so she was up and coming around.
No, Flirting with Disaster, yes, maybe Lost Highway. Yeah, I would probably say, in the mid-90s is when she really got popular. So why the hell didn't she appear? And they brought in Tuesday Night to play her and then kill her off anyway. Oh, maybe that was why. Maybe because they killed her off.
That was probably why. She didn't want to be she knew her screen time was going to be reduced and they were probably going to cut her fee back. And that's why she goes, no, I want the same amount of money I got for the last one. Oh, no, you're only going to be in the movie for 30 minutes before we kill you off. Nope, go find somebody else.
Right.
That's the best way to look at it,
Nancy and Craig Wasson, their body double, as I call him. They have like a little bit of a romance, and they come together and they do this thing where they with the kids and the kids wind up manifesting powers in their dreams, and they all try to go after Freddy. Freddy gets them, welcome to primetime, bitch, as we said. Oh, what a rush! That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, I just like that. Let's get
the hypodermic needles. That was a really nice. That was clever. To put hypodermic needles on instead of claws, have a hypodermic needle glove. Later, they try to find Nancy's dad, who is, like we said, he's a rent-a-cop now. I hate rent-a-cops too.
Yeah, drunken rent-a-cop.
I don't know what happened. I guess did mom die? I mean, it's so weird the way.
Well, mom did die at the. They definitively said Freddy did kill her mom. That was not a dream. That really
that whole
happen.
tag-on scene at the end, of the first movie. They weren't really clear about that. That's all I was saying.
Interestingly enough, a funny story I found out, I'll make it quick. Paramount, the movie was screened for Paramount to buy it, but during the screening, they had shot like all the different endings. They talked about it in this little mini documentary I watched, and they actually stopped the movie before the last reel because they realized they had the wrong ending on it, and then they attached the, Freddy pulling mom through the window. But by then, when they did that, the momentum had died, and executives did not care. They were just like, we pass. Yeah, Paramount passed on it because they had to stop the movie in the last reel so they could attach the ending they wanted. They didn't have the right ending. The ending they had was just them driving off into the sunset. That was the only ending they had.
This must have been like Katzenberg and Eisner's Paramount back then. Those guys were notoriously impatient when it came to movies.
Well, it turned out, look what happened. It was the best thing that could have happened because what happened, New Line distributed it themselves, and because of it, the movie made a shitload of money.
I have a feeling, though, if another studio had released it, it would have been a wider release, and the movie would have made even more money and been a huge hit.
Well, yeah, but
New Line didn't have the benefit of like 1,000 theater releases.
No, because it opened in New York. It only opened in New York. Like the very first premiere was
almost
New
like
York,
a road show. They even took it across the country,
Yeah, it was a regional thing. It just opened in different regions at given times. Like that was, that's what can happen if you self-distribute. You can only open an X amount of regions, But yeah, I mean, it turned out to be good for them because when the sequel came around, they had enough money to open.
But this really is like closure. This is Wes Craven trying to end this story because he brings back John Saxon. And then Freddy kills him and masquerades as him. And that really, there's it's kind of a cheesy scene when he shows up because he goes, "I've crossed over, baby." and then he fucking stabs her. He becomes Freddy and stabs her, kills her. It's like the whole thing is a Freudian dream when you think about it. She's killed by the image of her own father, and then she dies. I mean, that's the end. And you would think it's like killing Ripley off in the middle of an alien movie. It wouldn't make sense.
And we also got to talk about the dream suppression medication that Nancy's on.
Yes,
Hypnosil.
It's not possible. It's actually not possible. That's just a construction of the writers. You can't really stop people from dreaming. People are always dreaming constantly, no matter what. What
I love about that is that they brought that back. Even though the movie was a little underwhelming, they brought it back for Freddy vs. Jason.
Really? You know, I saw Freddy vs. Jason once. I really could not make head or tail of it. I can't stand Ronnie Yu.
I thought the movie was okay. It was a little underwhelming, but at the end of the day,
I think it was mainly crowd pleasing because it was a good hit. It was a good sized hit, although the budget was really high though.
Yeah, it was a crowd pleaser though. I mean, hey, that was one time me and a few family members who grew up on Freddy, who didn't get to see Freddy movies in theaters, like. We all went opening day just to go fucking see it because that way we could say, hey, we saw a Freddy movie on the big screen.
Yeah, they teased it at the end of the Final Friday. I enjoyed the Final Friday. I know it's not a big thing for you, but I did enjoy the Final Friday. Sean Cunningham came back and produced it. They got John LeMay from the Friday the 13th the series show to be the main hero in that. I really like that one a lot, actually. But at the end, you see Freddy's glove grab Jason's mask and pull it down to hell with him, and I thought that was cool.
And it was just a stinger, but it turned out to 10 years later
it became a reality because we still had a couple of we had a movie to finish up, 2 movies, I think, right? By that point, it was New Nightmare and Freddy's Dead. At the end of this, Nancy dies. They go to the funeral, and then that ending, you know, obviously it's kind of sad though, you know. I mean, it's not anything. I mean, I really like Dream Warriors a lot. I really do. It's probably
you're not the only one because you also have to remember when this was all edited, said and done. That's where the Dokken thing comes in, or Dokken, whichever.
I say Dokken. I always say.
I've always said Dokken myself. This movie, this was for the MTV generation. This was the MTV generation movie. This is why it made so much money, because they made a movie to appeal to the MTV generation. Right. You need to have a hit single or a good music video to play on MTV.
They did, yeah.
And what's it going to do? Yeah, they did. That's exactly what
I remember.
Did. So the marketing on this movie was amazing because you had a popular music video, kids got to see it, and then what did kids do? They fucking flocked to the theater to go see it. From what I understand, was the highest grossing independent film, one of the highest grossing independent film of the year, only to be beaten the next year by its own sequel.
Right, but I think even then, I don't know, I need to check the numbers because, yeah, this was very profitable. It was a $4 million budget, made 44 in the U.S. at least. There are no numbers internationally for some reason. I don't know why.
No, there are none.
Did New Line not release internationally? Is that what was going on there?
I don't know if they could release internationally because here's the thing. They could only self-distribute in the States at this time. So I don't know who would be responsible for releasing it overseas. I'm willing to bet that they had to, pay somebody else to do it.
We move on to Dream Master. Dream Master continues the story of Kristen Parker only for a little bit. I do like Tuesday Night. I think she's really cute. They were obviously going for something that was close to Patricia Arquette.
Close, but I like her. I like her.
I mean, like total kind of, she's just kind of
Well, because that's the thing. The movie, at the end of the day, it doesn't center around her, so it's a pass. It's kind of like, okay, she looks close enough. She's gonna get killed off in the first 2 reels, so fuck it. The movie's gonna center around Alice anyway when it's all over.
Yeah, I don't know. Why did they decide to do that then? Is it possible? Okay, wait a minute. Is it possible that Dream Master actually had a much bigger part for Kristen Parker, but with Patricia Arquette not being interested, they decided to truncate it instead? Is that possible?
Ask Brian Helgeland, dude. Ask Academy Award-winning writer.
But he was nothing back then.
He would tell you.
He's a name now, yes, but he was nothing back then. He was a good writer. He was a writer. What were they? I have a feeling that there were probably some changes, a lot of changes.
There may have been an original script written, but maybe Brian Helgeland came in and did a rewrite. I don't know.
Right.
So I got to watch Never Sleep Again to remember that. Dare I say, I'm gonna hate to say this, Part 4 is my favorite sequel. It's probably
really
it is my favorite sequel because
It did hit. Okay,
Dude,
I have some information for you
When I was
here.
a kid, I went to the library and they had a little film book on A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, and I loved reading that book. And then when I finally got to see the movie, so it's like Temple of Doom for me. It's like Temple of Doom is my favorite Indiana Jones movie because it holds a special place in my heart. Nightmare 4, I just remember reading this book about it. I also remember the making of A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, which I have on Laserdisc, which I used to have on VHS. And all the special effects from Steve Johnson and everything like that. The movie has way better special effects than the third one.
Okay.
I mean, in my opinion.
Well, let me. I have some information for you here about international distribution. New Line definitely did not have any kind of international distribution arm. Every company, it was released individually in every country by different companies. It seems that Warner Brothers had some distribution control in places like Japan and Germany, and Australia, Spain, Japan, Netherlands. It was released theatrically by Warner Brothers in Japan in 1988.
All right, so now I remember. Okay,
but the rest of these are all like small, tiny little companies.
I had to think of the Japanese Laserdisc covers. So yes, you are right. Parts 2 and 3 were done by Warner. 4 was CBS Fox, I think. The Laserdisc is a CBS Fox Laserdisc.
Yeah, 4 is a weird one. Go ahead, continue. But I have a weird story about the fourth movie that we're about to talk.
The fifth one, I think CIC Video released that one. And then Freddy's Dead, I'm not even 100% on Freddy's Dead.
Freddy's Dead, didn't we talk about TriStar? Didn't they have some hand in it?
That was, but that was on video though. New Line had still released it because media had already folded at this point. On home video, Columbia TriStar had it out here. But then when the movie was distributed in theaters, New Line, of course, did it themselves.
Yeah. You have like so many different companies here. Really, Astral in Canada released it theatrically. They were the ones who originally released Porky's. Remember, I think we talked about that.
Yeah, Astral
there was Video Visa in Mexico, Eurogroup in France, Geraldo Films in Spain, Palace Pictures in the United Kingdom. These are all tiny companies. It probably did. Okay, I don't know. Maybe they can't find the accounting figures on that because I can't. Not even the numbers has it. But all they have is. The only information they have that's solid is the American box office returns for it. But I'm pretty sure these movies had to have, because if you look at all of them, at least up to Freddy's Dead, they're all very visually oriented films, and you don't really need dialogue to tell you the story. That the dialogue could be removed and you would know what the hell was going on. So I have a feeling that the international audiences probably ate this shit up, and it was a huge hit internationally.
All right, well, that's the difference between 3, 4, and then 5. 3 and 4 had great visual effects, great special effects, but a good story behind them. You see, Part 5, they were running out of gas, and that was more style over fun.
But I mean, that's just so gorgeous to look at, production-wise. Oh my God.
Oh yeah, it's a gorgeous-looking movie, but we'll get to that in a bit. Part 4 to me is like the perfect amalgamation of storytelling, visual effects, and special effects. And that was right there. That was when Freddy Mania was in full 100% fucking swing.
Now, I want to mention something about Part 4 now.
Okay.
Now, HBO Max released all of the movies on their streaming service last year, with the exception of Part 4. You could not find the Dream Master anywhere. It was not available, and that really sucks too, because they had every single one, even the remake, except for Part 4, which belongs in the middle of a trilogy. Now you realize how frustrating that would be for someone who has seen these movies only once,
and they can't watch
the fourth one wasn't there. Terrible. I had to go searching for it turns out the Internet Archive actually has every Friday the 13th or every Nightmare on Elm Street movie. So if you want to see them in really good Blu-ray quality, you can go to the Internet Archive. And they also have all the Freddy shows.
Well, they don't have to worry about that anymore. Tubi TV has those now, and so does Screenbox. Tubi, you can watch them for free.
Tubi, I've always had issues with, as far as because it's commercials, and also they don't have the best. They don't have the best streaming.
Yeah, you're right. Well, dude, get this. I just watched. I don't want to go too far off tangent, but this goes into Tubi. Okay, remember the movie Young Einstein?
I'm sorry. What was that?
Young Einstein.
Is that Yahoo Serious? Oh, for fuck's
Yahoo
sake!
Serious. Well, hold on. I'm not talking.
You remember when we as a nation stood up as one and said no to Yahoo Serious?
That was Reckless Kelly.
Oh my God,
anyway,
that guy.
To make a quick point, okay? I'm just making
now
a quick
I'm thinking
point
about
to
Yahoo
agree
Serious.
with you.
Thanks, Froelich.
I watched Young Einstein the other day in hopes that it would be a cleaned up, high definition transfer, that kind of thing. It is the same existing standard definition film print fucking transfer that they've been using for like the last 20 some odd years, man. The reason I know this, there's cigarette burns on the real changes.
Oh.
There's cigarette burns on the fucking image. And it's like, I was wondering, and you're right, sometimes they get a good print, but most of the time they don't. In this case, they're still recycling that old fucking DVD era
Because they can't find anything? They can't find better materials? Was there a fire, maybe?
I don't know. Dude, you have to remember, this is an Australian production that Warner Brothers had funneled a little bit of money into, a Village Roadshow.
They had convinced them.
Funneled some money. Yeah, to funnel some money into to complete it.
I'm telling you, Yahoo Series is going to be the next Jim Varney.
In the industry, we call them cigarette burns.
Oh, you were but I was dead. You